we're going to talk with the assessor, Edye McCarthy, about the assessment process. The last time the town reassessed properties was in 2016, and the time before we did that was about 60 years ago. I think Mount Vernon, the last time they reassessed was around the Civil War, I heard. Is that true?
We don't want to compare to them.
Yeah, but I'm saying the problem with assessments is if you don't assess and keep the property rolls accurate and transparent, people will be paying different amounts of taxes for the same property. So before we reassessed, you could have two homes on the same street, and somebody could be paying $20,000 and somebody could be paying $30,000 for the tax for an equivalent house. So the town board agreed back in 2016 that every I think 5 or 6 years, by resolution, we said we would be updating the reassessment process. We delayed it a year, and we are now starting the process again. And right now, just to be transparent and open and to educate, we're going to have some questions and answers with the assessor. Any board member could ask whatever you want. And then we're going to create a YouTube, share it with the school boards and village boards, and publicize this presentation. So just to start, Edye McCarthy is our assessor, and could you maybe begin by discussing the purpose of reassessment and why accurate values are so important?
Thank you, Supervisor Feiner. The main reason, as you mentioned, that the assessed values are so important is because so everybody will pay their fair share of property taxes, no more, no less. So back in 2016, when we did our initial reassessment prior to 1956, we created more transparency to the taxpayers. We created more stability for our budgeting, and not just the town's budget, but the schools' budgets, the village's budgets, and the fire district's budgets. In addition to that, the number of grievance appeals has dropped off significantly since 2016 because the values are current. Nobody likes to pay property taxes, and nobody likes to see their taxes go up. But as long as they're fair and equitable, that's our goal. So since 2016, like I said, the appeals have dropped off significantly. The communication between my department, my team, and the taxpayers has increased. People are very inquisitive about what has been transpiring. So we did the initial, as you mentioned, we did the initial reassessment in 2016. Since then, in 2017, 18, 19, and again in 20, we were changing assessments based on market values. So if the real estate market was going up, everybody saw an increase in their assessed values. The real estate market was going down, they saw a decrease in their assessments. In addition to the market trending, we also were changing assessments based on inventory, building permits, things like that.
Right. What's the difference between AV and market value?
Really good question. The market value is what a taxpayer can sell their house for on the market today. So if you think your property is worth $1 million, then that would be the market value of your home.
At arm's length.
At arm's length, correct. Thank you. The assessed value is a percentage of the market value of your property. So we are now, and have been since 2016, at 100% of market value, our assessments. So if you feel your property, arm's length, is worth $1 million on the market, your assessment should be $1 million.
Another question is, discuss the success of the project in 2016 and how many people participated.
So that's a key into this new reassessment. I feel both personally and professionally that the reason why the 2016 reassessment was so very successful after almost 60 years is that we had a huge, I don't know how to say it, but tremendous amount of property owners' participation. We asked the property owners to pay attention to public meetings that we held, and they did. We asked them to pay attention to mailings that we sent out, and they did. We asked for the property owners to be responsive to questionnaires that we sent out, and they were. So one of the reasons why I think this is great that I'm with you tonight and going forward is that we're asking the taxpayers for the same amount of participation, if not better. So industry standards during a reassessment project is about 50% of the population. We were able to obtain about 65%. But I feel that now everybody is aware of what transpires. I'm hopeful that there'll be more participation going forward.
Why is it important that this be done every 5 years?
We want to be able to maintain transparency, current market values, and we need to do that by watching the market and the trending factors. The state issues that market value. The state issues that rate that we keep talking about 100%. So they watch us and they watch our processes and procedures and they test us basically. So it's like getting a grade. And the reason why it's industry standards, once again, that municipalities do cyclical reassessments, and it's recommended between 4 and 6 years. So we're in the 5th year. Our market has been fluctuating, which all real estate markets do. So we were actually, this is perfect timing, we were in jeopardy of losing our 100% of the market value.
And what happens if you lose 100%?
It's very difficult for property owners to understand how you have $1 million home and your assessment is only $800,000, or you have $1 million home and your assessment is $1.2 million. So it's much more transparent. It creates more inequities as time goes on if you're not continuing to do the reassessments throughout that cyclical period.
You'd also have to do a full-blown reassessment as opposed to what we're going to do, right?
Yeah, so what Councilman Sheehan was indicating before is if we are maintaining 100% of market values, and in order to be able to do that going forward, we do not have to go as in-depth as we did in 2016. And I'm sure everybody's going to be happy to hear that part. It's at the end of the day, it's the same result, but the processes and procedures are different because we've been maintaining 100% of market value. In addition to what I just said, why we're doing this is because it is saving a tremendous amount of money to the taxpayers in what we have to pay for this project as opposed to the one in 2016.
You
Because we're
were
maintaining
mentioning to
100%.
me like flyovers that we don't have to do now.
So why we're doing this right now, and like I said, we're saving a tremendous amount of money because there's something known as orthophotography. In Westchester County, they create this orthophotography by flying over in a plane and taking pictures and maintaining that every 3 years. So we are right at the end of the 3rd year in being able to use that data to do this reassessment. If we wait 1 more year, the Westchester County data will be out of date, and we will have to put quote unquote boots on the ground, knocking on every single door again, like we did in 2016.
So we're talking about exterior evaluations rather than somebody going into people's homes.
Well, it's an interesting time that we live in. I don't have to say that, but we will not be doing interior inspections this time unless somebody really, really requests it. I am not comfortable with that, to be honest with you. We are doing exterior inspections the Tyler Technologies is our revaluation contractor, and there will be inspectors out in the field. They will be wearing yellow vests. I'm not sure if they say inspector or Tyler Technologies, but they're bright yellow, so you can see them. Their names, pictures, and their vehicles that they will be driving is on our website. So if somebody's not comfortable, they can check. Our police departments are fully aware that they will be out in the field, and they will just be doing the exterior inspections. If somebody wants to speak with Tyler, we are doing either Zoom calls or phone calls, and exterior inspections only.
Could you tell, I'm sorry, did somebody else have a question? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Could you explain how we selected the company and the process that we used?
The town of Greenburgh has a policy in place that I don't recall how much to exceed the amount, but you have to go out for an RFP, which is what we did. And actually, Supervisor Feiner, we only received one response from the RFP that we put out initially. So you had us put it out again. And once again, we only had the one response from Tyler Technologies, which is working out well, in my opinion, because they did our last reassessment in 2016. They're intimately familiar with Greenburgh. So when we put the RFP out, again, there was only the one response from them. So.
Right. How many parcels will we need to have a full revaluation?
So the way we're doing this reassessment in 2021 for 2022 property taxes is we are utilizing the Westchester County Orthophotography and Tyler Technologies cutting edge software to do something called iSketch. And they've already been through that process. And what they've determined is that there's outliers. So with the orthophotography doesn't match the iSketch software, they'll go out and physically inspect those properties. If our inventory does not match what we find through other sources, we'll go out and knock on a door or send a letter to a homeowner. So all told with that, we probably have maybe 2,500 to 4,000. As the time progresses, that will change and increase as we find more outliers.
In terms of the state's involvement, what is the role of the state?
So currently, New York State Real Property Tax Services, Department of Taxation and Finance, they have approved our processes, procedures, and timeline for this 2021 reassessment. We have a Southern Regional Representative who will be at well, I can't say that. We are inviting him to every meeting that we have with Tyler Technologies, with other, other meetings that we'll have throughout this time. As they were last time, they were in the same, they were with us every step of the way.
I was just thinking right now, some people may say, right now the whole world is all like messed up in terms of the pandemic, and does it make sense to do the reassessment now, do the process now when we're in the middle of a pandemic? How is this going to impact the upheavals? How is that going to impact the result? Will this be an accurate assessment 2 years from now?
So, very good question. The valuation date that our target date to value all the properties, we have to find one date in time. And so by New York State law, that date for us for June 1, 2021, the valuation date is July 1 of 2020. Having said that, we are going to be using market conditions, market sales, comparable properties, income and expense information from the commercial properties between July 1 of 2019 to June 30th, 2020. So as unfortunate as it is, we will be capturing the good times and the bad times. And they will be reflected in the value of the properties in June of 2021.
So do you feel that from your standpoint as a professional assessor, is this how is this going to impact, most people? Do you feel that there's going to be as much dramatic changes as there was in 2016?
Oh goodness, no. Very good question, but I do not, because our inventory is current from 2016. We've been able to maintain that. We have new assessment software during this reassessment, and it's cutting edge software. So I do not feel that we're going to see any of those shifts the way that we saw them back then. There will be some properties that will have increases and decreases, of course, because of market conditions. But those shifts, goodness no, that was a 60-year reassessment cycle, that's why.
And the market is actually better in the suburbs than in the city right now.
It is a lot better, actually. And between that time frame, it is a lot better.
Another question is, how does Tyler come up with their appraisal values?
I have to take 1 second break because I have to plug my computer in because it's dying. Hold on one second.
I have to put my light on anyway, so.
Okay, I'm back. I feel better. Thank you. I was afraid I was going to die right in the middle of it.
That's a good segue for later when we're talking about Westchester Power.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens with reassessments, and particularly this one, is that there is a model that was built back in 2016, and all of the inventory was put into this model, and that's how the values were created. I'll explain that model in 1 second. Now, the model today is 6 years old because it was built back in 2014-15. So now it's 6 years old. So it's old. It's like driving a 40-year-old car as opposed to a 2-year-old car. That's how I would compare the model. In the model, what it looks at and how it's created strictly for residential properties is that it will look at the inventory for a house, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, if the attic is finished or basement is finished, what kind of condition it's in, any tennis courts, swimming pools, any amenities, fireplaces, decks, things like that. And it will measure that, your property, in comparison to a property that's sold with those similar amenities. And that's how the model is built. So what I'm asking taxpayers to do is, because our valuation date is July 1 of 2020, they can actually prepare right now for the values coming out in June of 2021 to look at properties that have sold in their neighborhood and to compare that. They can get appraisals, don't have to spend the money. They can get current market analysis from realtors, or they can just pull up sales by themselves and see what's in their neighborhood.
You mentioned earlier on that for most people they won't have a physical inspection, but there'll be some people who may have inspections. Could you discuss how many of the properties do you think will need to be physically inspected, how those properties will be notified, and during the COVID situation, how are you going to deal with inspections when people are concerned about COVID-related risks?
So we have started our data collection process. That's what we're doing right now. And our team is going out in the field. We have sent out notices to tell people that, in a letter form, to tell people that we have started the project and that we are going to be inspecting their property. We didn't send a letter out to all of our taxpayers, only the taxpayers that we felt needed an inspection. Sorry. So those letters have since gone out in the mail. They're being notified. We started in Terrytown. We're going to work our way through the villages first and then the unincorporated area. So if you receive a letter from Tyler Technologies that says important reassessment information on the envelope, it is important reassessment information. So they are being notified that way, and they will just knock on the doors. If nobody's home, we'll try again. And if they want to speak with Tyler during this period to discuss the interior of their home, we are asking them to call Tyler Technologies and or send photographs of the interior. We would prefer not to interiorly inspect any properties.
Right. So you just sent out the data mailer? That's
Yeah, it's no, not the data mailers. It's a cover letter saying that we're going to be out inspecting your properties. It just on the top of it, it heads it up with Tyler Technologies and Greenburgh, and important reassessment information. All of the information that we are sending out to the public, all the questions and answers, frequently asked questions, that's all on the Town of Greenburgh Assessor's web homepage.
And what's a data mailer? Because was a little confused about that.
Okay, nope, that's fine. A data mailer, we will be sending them out to all property owners in the town, all residential property owners, sometime in August. And what that is, it's a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with your name, your address, your parcel number, and your inventory. So for example, if you open this up and you see that you have, or that we have 10 bedrooms and 15 bathrooms, and that's not correct, we're sending this letter to you, asking you to correct it and send it back to us.
Right. Another question I have is, what if a homeowner says, you know what, I just don't want to participate? Do they have to?
They do not by law have to participate in any of the communications. However, we are mandated by law to put an assessment on that property, on all real property in the town of Greenburgh. So my preference would be to suggest participation, but if they choose not to, then we put the value, we send them the notification, and at that time, if they're dissatisfied, they can contact us. If not, there's 4 or 5 different alternatives after that.
And if you're going to be doing interior inspections, what happens if the homeowner is not home, and do they have to also be present when you do exterior inspections?
It's preferable if they are home during the exterior inspections. We are not doing interiors, so that is eliminated, but we are going to knock on their doors, let them know that we're there, and measure the outside of the building once again.
So you're really just saying, you know, if somebody's snooping around your house, this is the reason you shouldn't feel that, you shouldn't be concerned.
Right, correct.
Paul, I have a question at this point.
Sure.
It was a question based on the description of the kind of analyses that's going to take place, which is, you know, sort of like a drive-by assessment. And I'm just wondering if there will be an appeals process in place, because a drive-by assessment leaves a lot of room for subjectivity, because you're not getting an accurate picture of what the true value is of the house. I mean, you know, you can drive through any neighborhood and see several houses of similar style, 4-bedroom, I just want to finish my point, and make an assumption that every 4-bedroom house has a finished basement, 2 bathrooms, you know, whatever, and it may not be accurate. And so is there going to be a way of appealing Tyler's judgment based by their drive-by assessments?
There'd be several layers of appeals, right, Edye?
Yeah, Judith, you jumped the gun just a little bit.
That's coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Um,
can I get back to that?
you
As
can
soon as
talk
we
to
finish,
her.
I don't want anybody to think that this is just a drive-by. We're not just driving by. Experience will tell you that 90% of the time, what the outside of a house looks like, the inside of the house looks like. There are instances where that is not the case. And there are instances where property owners forgot to take out a building permit when they wanted to finish their basement or finish their attic. They might have forgotten. So we might not have that inventory. And that's one of the main reasons why we're asking for participation when we send out the data mail. Because we may not have the fact that you have a finished basement, or we may have the wrong room count or the wrong condition count. That's why we're asking for the taxpayers' participation in this. There are other resources that are available to us that we are using on a daily basis in order to gather the inventory. There's all kinds of resources that are out there. And if somebody decides not to participate, there's other ways to get the inventory. So,
And how long does it generally take once somebody's at somebody's house? How long is the process?
At the most, because we're not doing interior inspections, 10, 15 minutes at the most. Depends on if we have to remeasure the entire house.
You know, let's say somebody is working, and they're not at home, and they want a weekend appointment. Could they get a weekend appointment?
We are scheduling weekend appointments if we have to. Preferably not during the hours, during business hours and up till dusk. But if somebody needs a weekend appointment, we're going to be available.
Is there a way to verify the information taken by Tyler?
Oh, sure. When Tyler gets finished with their data collection for the entire town, Judith, this is part A of your question. When Tyler gets finished, they will be sending out what I mentioned earlier is a data mailer that will give you all of the inventory that Tyler has collected for your home. We are asking for you to review that data mailer with all the inventory and send it back to us, whether it's correct or not. I mean, whether the inventory that we have is correct or not. If it is not correct, we're asking property owners to correct it and then send it back to us. And if it is correct, just sign it and send it back. And this way we'll know. There are instances where if you call Tyler and say, you have me down for 2 bathrooms and I only have 1.5, they'll probably just change it over the telephone. If it comes to where you tell Tyler, or Tyler has it that we have a finished basement and the property owner really does not have a finished basement, Tyler will probably ask for photographs of the basement to see whether it's finished or not. And that's the way it's going to go. Normally, I can't even say in a normal world, I don't even know what that is anymore, but normally Tyler would go out and do an interior inspection.
And when do you think people will get the responses? When will they get the results, actually?
So what's happening now is this is really important, these dates that I'm going to share with you at the moment. So we are in the process between June and August of this year. We are in the process of our data collection phase. In August, from August to September, is when we will be mailing out our data mailers for all the residential properties. Actually, the condominium unit owners have received their data mailers. They're going out this week. So they should be receiving them either this week or next week, the condominium owners. As far as the residential, the data mailers will be sent out between August and September.
And will homeowners be able to do an informal meeting with Tyler representatives to discuss this?
Yes. So the next step after we receive back the data mailers, we are working on our valuation analysis, and that's putting values on all of the properties, the commercial, the vacant land, the residential, the multi-families. That's what we're working on between September and October. We'll be out in the field once again between October and January. The March March of 2021 is a very, very, very important date for all property owners because that's when the preliminary values will be sent to you in March.
And
We're
then
hoping-
people have meetings,
March. I'm sorry, Paul, what?
and then people will have meetings and question or have discussions, and then Tyler will, or your office will make adjustments.
We are meeting with the Tyler Technologies between March and April of 2021. We'll be meeting with the public the same way they did last time back in the cafeteria at Town Hall, and they will be meeting and to hear the cases. As it stands right now, our plan for March of 2021 will be to have in-person meetings. If we're still not in a good place, then we will be either doing them by Zoom or by telephone and email the documentation. So that goes from March to April. That's the first step in the appeal. Judith, that's part B of your question. Then we go on, and the tentative assessment roll is published by law June 1st. In between June 1st and the third Tuesday in June is when the assessor's office will be meeting with the public for their second appeal. They do not have to go through Tyler, but that is their first option. The second option is with me, my team. Once grievance day is upon us, which is the third Tuesday in June, again by law, that starts the formal process. That's when you file a grievance application and the Board of Assessment Review will hear your case.
What, in Westchester County, what % of the communities have been updating their reassessment rolls, and are they the ones that have reassessed? Are they all doing what Greenburgh's doing and updating it every 5 years or 6 years?
There are probably 6 or 7 municipalities. I wish there were more that reassess that are at 100% of market value. That they're maintaining that. They are all of them are on a cyclical basis. Some are 4 years, some are 6 years. I think that's it. I think there's just 4 and 6 years. But they, in the interim years, they're still maintaining their 100% of market value.
So
Statistically,
what % of the county is not reassessed? You know?
I don't. More than not, unfortunately, I could say that.
Right. In terms of, I just have couple more questions. If somebody, wants to have an informal meeting, what information do they have to bring?
Ideally, if they would like to meet with Tyler, even, in the next couple months, photographs would be very, very helpful. Appraisals, but I don't want anybody to go out and spend money that they don't have to. Current market analysis from realtors, that would be very, very helpful. And any other documentation that they think, would help their case. If they have good things about their house, they want to write a letter to Tyler Technologies, that would be wonderful. If they want to talk about the topography, which is the way that their land is, in a letter, that would be fine too. But photographs are very welcomed.
In terms of if people are not satisfied after they have informal meetings with Tyler or with you, they still could file a grievance.
Yes, they can.
you want to explain what that is?
No. Yes.
Go ahead.
At the informal appeals process with Tyler, that is going to happen between March and April. We're asking the taxpayers to bring any and all information to the meetings that will help show Tyler Technologies why their property is or is not worth the value that Tyler has preliminarily placed on their properties. If they're dissatisfied with that, they have the opportunity, to meet with my team. My team and I are going to be asking for the same data, whether it's an appraisal, whether it's a current market analysis from a realtor, whether it's photographs, letters, we'll be asking for the same documentation. If they're still dissatisfied with our determination, my teams, then they have the opportunity to file the formal grievance petition, which is they can file that between June 1st and the third Tuesday of June every year, and that's the law. That process goes in front of 5 members of the community, 5 appointed members of the community who are familiar with the area, and they will be looking at all of the documentation that is submitted in support of the contested assessment.
It's the Board of Assessment Review, right?
The Board of Assessment Review, yes, thank you.
Before we decided to proceed with, with this initiative,
Paul, and if they're not satisfied with the Board of Assessment Review, they still have another option.
So as of June, the Board of Assessment Review will hear all the cases through in deliberative session through the summer months. Mid-September is when the final letters, notifications will be mailed to property owners if the Board of Assessment Review has changed the assessment. If a property owner is still dissatisfied with that determination, they have a further right to file a small claims assessment review proceeding with the Westchester County Supreme Court.
And that's called a SCAR, right?
And that's called a SCAR. They do not have to hire an attorney. I know it sounds a little scary, but they can do that on their own. The process is relatively easy to walk through. They don't have to hire an attorney. They don't have to hire a tax representative. But that's their next step. So there's like 5 opportunities for appeal if you're dissatisfied.
Before we proceeded with this, you reached out to all the villages, and the village governments basically endorsed proceeding with this.
It makes sense, which is what they were saying.
But the answer is yes.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so we have letters from
Yes.
village leaders supporting this. How have you maintained the roles after the last reappraisal over the since 2016? What has your office done? And I guess that should make this process easier because you've really done a lot of the work that you made little shifts each year.
So every year since 2016, we test the market, and we test the market based on that one valuation date of July 1. So for this year, 2020, our valuation date was July 1 of 2019. We have sales and information that helps us to be able to identify what's happening in the market. We take those sales and we analyze them. We send them up to the state. The state analyzes them, and the state tells us, along with our team, on what's happening in the market. For example, in a certain area of town, maybe the market went up 3%. So assessments would go up 3%. In another area of town, the market only went up 2%. So assessments would increase 2% in that particular area. So we have been alongside of, again, Tyler Technologies, my team, and New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services, all 3 independent, have been coming up with the same level of change in our market. And that's how we've been able to maintain 100% of market value.
Well, another question is, what if there's no comparisons of individual properties?
So one of 2 things would happen if there's no comparables sales to a subject property. We would either analyze out of that window that I discussed, July 1 of 19 to June 30th of 2020. We maybe would have to go out of that window a little bit to look for sales, or if there really are no sales because it's such a unique property, then we would determine a market value based on the cost approach, because
Right.
there's 3 approaches to value.
And what about commercial properties?
So commercial properties this week have received their request for information. It's called, we sent them a cover letter with income and expense request information. And I know that they've got it because they're all calling with questions. So that's a good thing. And we've asked them to show us between that window what their real estate is doing. So we don't really care about how many shirts you sold in your clothing store. We're looking more towards how much rent are you paying, and or how much rent are you receiving from that building that you own. We don't care that Burger King sells 80 million hamburgers a year. We care about how much rent Burger King is paying to the property owner of that site. That's the information that we're asking for.
So if there's a lot of businesses that are out right now, or the landlords aren't getting the rent, will we see a major decline in commercial properties during this reassessment?
I don't see a major decline. There are some, yes, that are out for temporarily. I do see some that are getting aid that are still able to pay their rents. I do see that. I am hearing that. And I'm also hearing that, you know, businesses are closed for the time being. We are taking all of that into consideration as we're going through this process.
And if a commercial property owner has questions or concerns, how do they, is the grievance process the same as with homeowners?
Yes, it is the same for all properties. The process and the dates that I gave you is exactly the same for all properties.
And what's the cost of this whole project?
The project originally was going to cost about $775,000. We are housing Tyler Technologies at Town Hall, so we are saving the taxpayers about $40,000 to $45,000 by doing that. So it's about, I think Roberta's on the phone. I think it's about $730,000.
One issue that comes up every year is the homestead relating to condos. And could you give us like the pros and cons of the homestead concerns?
So everybody seems to think that homestead, the exemption, can I back up for 1 minute and explain what that is?
Right.
Okay, so homestead is an exemption, not really, but that's what they call it. It breaks properties in your municipality out into two different buckets. One is residential and one is commercial. So the residential will typically fall into bucket A and the commercial would fall into bucket B. The condominiums that are there now would fall into bucket A. But more important that the commercial properties, the reason for the two different buckets is because if we adopted this, we would have two different tax rates. Typically, always that I know of, the residential tax rate is always lower than the commercial tax rate. So if you have two properties, one in the residential and one in commercial, they're both worth $500,000, both of them. The residential $500,000 home would pay much less in property taxes than the commercial $500,000 property. Their taxes would be higher because their tax rate is higher. That initially was created back in the late 80s or the early 80s, actually, to help homeowners offset some of the property tax burden. Not like that at this point. And that's why there are 1,000 municipalities in New York State, and I believe there are 14, maybe 19 that have the homestead option, that have adopted the homestead option. As far as the condominiums are concerned, they would, right now, it's just one big bucket. The condominiums would go into the residential bucket where the tax rate is lower, of course, but their value would be based on market value and not the New York State real property tax law restricted value. And that would be a difference.
If we did the homestead, and for example, like Central Avenue, and White Plains doesn't do it, and Yonkers doesn't do homestead, is there a disadvantage to the Greenburgh commercial base?
A very large disadvantage.
Why?
because our taxes here would be, our tax rate would be higher for the commercial properties. And if a commercial property owner has a, for example, on Central Avenue, who has a Scarsdale post office address, they can move one block down the road and go to Yonkers and have a Scarsdale post office address and pay a significant amount less in property taxes because Yonkers does not have the homestead. And similarly on 119 for White Plains.
And it would be the same thing with condos where if Greenburgh had homestead and White Plains, Yonkers, and surrounding communities did not, then people would, it would make it much harder for people to sell, I would assume.
That's correct. My opinion as well. I don't know that for a fact because we haven't tested that, but there are case studies out in the industry that have said exactly what you just said.
Yeah, I told you before this that I would ask you a couple questions for a couple minutes, and I think I went over the 5-minute time period that I told the board we were going to need for this. But is there anything else?
How many did you get from Edye?
What?
How many of those questions did you get from Edye?
I know. So I'm an expert, so I just wanted to ask if there's anything else that you'd want to mention that we forgot to ask.
I think that you did a great job at asking the questions that you asked. I would just like to end it with the fact that I really would like the property tax, the property owner's participation. When the letters come out, when the mailings come out, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to call us. I would like to just, for these purposes, sorry, need my glasses, just to reiterate, Tyler Technologies, if you have any questions, their phone number is 914-231-8250. Again, all of the reassessment information as we progress will be on our website. But if we're getting these letters and we're asking you to respond, please.
Well, that was my question. Will all this information be on the website for those who missed it? And Paul had some really good questions. Will residents be able to find all this information on the website?
Right on the assessor's webpage.
Thank you very much.
And we will keep it as up to date as we possibly can.
Okay, appreciate
All right,
it. Thank you, Edye. Great
Thank
job.
you.
So now that we've talked about homestead and we've talked about reassessment, and on the same night, we voted on legislation regarding condos and co-ops, we need to make it very clear, we're not talking about homestead. We're not talking about existing condos or co-ops. What we are passed the resolution supporting in the New York State legislators, with the New York State legislators, deals with condos and co-ops that don't currently exist. Just, I don't want there to be confusion because we happened to do it in the same night and it came up.
Right.
Well, I have a question. So let me just, so I'm a resident and I'm buying a brand new condo. This resolution that we just passed would apply to me, correct?
Only if it's signed into law.
Only if it's signed into law.
So like if you're buying a condo now that's just been built, and I don't know if there's anything that's just been built, you know, right now, then it's fine. If the law is signed, if the law is approved by the legislature and signed into law, this would be more, you know, they're looking at, say, potential potential townhouses at Elmwood. And we're looking at whether it should be townhouses or single family homes. So this would impact that development, which hasn't even been built.
So all new developments that have not been built yet.
Or approved.
Or approved. Okay, I just want everyone to be clear.
So just to be very clear with your question, is somebody comes in and they're buying a condo now, this does not apply because that condo existed prior to next January 1st.
Got it. Thank you very much.
For condos that don't exist, nobody owns it because they're not there. And we have no condos in the pipeline, or co-ops or condos. And so this does not apply to anyone who actually is living in one of the units.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Great. Well, thank you.